Um, my name is Gabe Gwendon. I'm the director of the college access team at the Denver Scholarship Foundation. And previous to my role as director, I served as one of our college advisors at Lincoln High School for 5 years. And I will invite my co-presenter, Emily Carlson, to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Emily Carlson. I have been with DSF a little bit over 4 years. I was an advisor for 4 years, and then this year I am the program director. So I help out with various teams, the success team, scholarship, and access. But I do a lot of work with financial aid as well. And so, yeah, this presentation today is a financial aid 101. So we're just going to go broadly over the financial aid process and talk a little bit about FAFSA. I do see some advisors who have been here for a while. I don't know, this is a pretty broad overview, so it's not going to be a whole lot of new information for many of you, but thank you to the volunteers who are joining. We appreciate your help this financial aid season.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And as Emily stated, this will be a very introductory session. And so some of our goals for today is, especially for our financial aid volunteers and new team members, to review kind of the fundamentals of financial aid and why financial aid is important. So the section of the presentation that I'll be covering will define financial aid, look at some cost of attendance examples to kind of set the stage for why financial aid completion is so important for our students, and especially as a part of the workshops that we'll be leading in January and February. We'll talk about types of aid and how to qualify for aid, and then I'll pass things off and Emily will dive a little bit deeper into the actual details of FAFSA application. And let's move to the next slide, Emily. Oh, also, kind of just to set some of our meeting norms, if questions do arise, please, all attendees should be able to use the chat. So at the top of your meeting screen there, you should be able to find a chat button and type any questions, and we'll be monitoring those questions throughout. We'll make sure to address them, although we may not address them immediately in the moment. So Emily and I will be monitoring the chat if you do have questions. So financial aid, the definition of financial aid that DSF uses is any grant, scholarship, loan, or paid employment offered to help students meet the cost of college expenses. And so as we move further through the slide, or further through my slides, we'll be kind of reviewing the details of what those grants look like, examples of scholarships, example of loans and interests in connected to loans as well. So our goal for my section is kind of to dissect and define those different components of financial aid. And the reason why all of this is incredibly important is because of the cost of college. And so these are very common examples in high destination institutions for the students that will be attending our financial aid workshops and that DSF staff are working at. And these are simply sticker prices. So this is anticipated cost of attendance at 3 different types of institutions: a public community college, a public university, and a private university. And what students oftentimes hear throughout their high school experience is college is very, very expensive. And then they hear that because of these advertised cost of attendance or sticker prices. But the entire goal of our financial aid workshops and of the financial aid system in general is to reduce those costs, to make the institutions affordable for students. And as later in the presentation, we will look at some examples, an example of a financial aid offer that does reduce these costs to what students actually have to pay. but obviously we are looking at really different costs when thinking about institutional costs from community college to public university and private schools. Cost of attendance includes both direct and indirect costs. So indirect examples of indirect costs may be travel, personal expenses, books and supplies, and these are costs that students are not paying directly to the institution, but rather costs that they need to have a plan for covering, although it won't be included in a bill from the school itself. Direct costs, on the other hand, are costs that students will be billed for. Students and families would be billed for room and meals, so the cost of living on campus, if that is their plan. And then even for students that are commuting to schools, tuition and fees would be included in direct costs as well. How colleges calculate cost of attendance, though, is inclusive of both the anticipated indirect costs and the anticipated direct costs as well. So financial aid is and the types of financial aid are the components of an offer that seek to reduce those direct and indirect costs or provide aid for students to be able to cover them. And the types of financial aid are kind of broken down into four different components. One that would be scholarships and grants, another that would be work study, a third that would be loans, and then out of pocket. So what students have in savings, what students are earning in employment outside of work study, what parents or family members may be able to support. Um, and these with scholarships especially and grants, they are going to be both need-based opportunities and merit-based opportunities. Need-based grants are going to be provided to students when they demonstrate financial need through submission of the financial aid applications that they're completing. And merit-based aid would be scholarships that students are applying for based on their high school accomplishments or college accomplishments after they've enrolled in school. Things that they'll be looking at is their role as leaders inside their schools, GPA, volunteering experiences, and things like that. We're going to break down a little bit further those different components. So grants are essentially free money, and DSF college advisors will be talking to their students in that light. They're not aid that needs to be paid back. Students, in order to earn need-based grants, will have to demonstrate financial need, and they'll also have to continue to meet academic requirements to receive that money. Grants generally are coming from the federal government and state governments, but also colleges as well will have kind of autonomy to provide grant aid to students. And grants are provided to students based upon financial need, and financial need is demonstrated through submission of financial aid applications as well. A classic example, very important and often provided to American citizens and permanent residents that demonstrate need is the Pell Grant. So many team members may be familiar with that from receiving it themselves, or working with many students that receive it. And so the Pell Grant covers $7,395 in this current year. And for the maximum award is accessed through financial aid submission. Another grant is the CU Boulder Colorado Promise Grant. And so that would be a variable award that the institution determines the amount that will go to the student's financial aid award based on the information that's submitted in the financial aid application. I think that one thing that's very exciting about financial aid submission is oftentimes students receive their SAI, which, can anyone on the call remind me what student aid index, is that correct? We're working with new language
Yep, that's
with financial aid. So I'm a little rusty on SAI, but it's student aid index, and that will demonstrate what they're eligible for in terms of federal grants. And if you compare that maximum award, if you have a student that is eligible for the max federal Pell Grant, you're already looking, if you think back to the examples of cost of attendance, you're already looking at very affordable college experiences for a student that is max Pell Grant eligible. So examples of scholarships. Scholarships are primarily divided into institutional or private scholarships. Most institutional dollars, most scholarship dollars will come from the college themselves. The application process will vary for institutional scholarships and is kind of an ongoing effort for DSF college advisors as they follow up to financial aid submission. But the vast majority, if step one of accessing any of these institutional scholarship dollars will be financial aid submission, which is kind of the goal of the workshops that our volunteers will be supporting in the spring semester. Additional institutional scholarships are accessed by students through their college portals and oftentimes have a priority deadline of March 1st from one year to the next for students to submit those additional institutional scholarship applications. Many scholarships are also coming from private organizations, from companies, from churches, and those scholarships will have their own criteria. Generally, those scholarships can be used at any college. The amount will vary from one scholarship to the next, and deadlines are also set by organizations. So some examples would be the DSF scholarship application. Other scholarship applications that many team members and volunteers may have heard of would include Betcher Scholarship, the Daniels Fund Scholarship as well are two private scholarships that are very commonly applied to by Denver Public School students. To further kind of demonstrate, I'm going to ask, can we get everyone to mute in the crowd? Thank you. So the DSF scholarship is a promise scholarship. So if students meet our deadlines and meet our requirements, they will be awarded the scholarship dollars. Students do have to demonstrate financial eligibility, choose to enroll in one of our partner schools and enroll at a full-time status. And our award amounts vary from one college to the next. So $3,600 for four-year institutions and $1,700 for community colleges and technical colleges. Our scholarship is also renewable for all 4 years. So that's just one example of a private scholarship. Work study is another component of the financial aid application, of a financial aid award, I'm sorry, that students will often be offered. This allows students to have a part-time job on campus, and at times work study could be an off-campus experience. Students do have to apply for this opportunity, but it provides them with kind of some flexible employment and on-campus networking as well. The money will go directly to a student, and then the student determines if they're going to use that money for indirect costs or direct costs. And that income's not included in students' financial aid offer for the following year as well, which is another benefit of work study. And then loans as well. So loans are oftentimes going to be included in a financial aid package for students. Federal loans are the most commonly received or at least offered loan, and they do have an interest rate, and students would obviously have to pay back loans. So loans, different from everything else we've looked at so far, loans are investments that students are making in themselves and will have to be paid back at a later date. Some of the federal loans that are offered to students will accumulate interest immediately upon being dispersed to the student, and those are unsubsidized loans. And then there are subsidized loans that are offered to students that don't accumulate any interest until 6 months after students graduate college. Students do have to pay back loans regardless of whether or not they do well in school, if they graduate or stop out of school as well. All of these different components of financial aid are accessed through the submission of the financial aid applications that we will be working on in our workshops as well. And Emily will dive a little bit deeper into some of those, into one of the applications as well, later in our presentation. And in fact, I'll pass it off to you right now, Emily.
Yep, sounds good. So I guess we'll pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions about the broad overview of the financial aid process before we get into the financial aid applications? Well, if you think of anything, yeah, feel free to put it in the chat. We can look at those questions. But so yes, the first step in getting financial aid is applying for it. And this is something that students have to do every year. So it's not just something that they do when they're seniors in high school, it's every year that they are in college as well. So the first option for completing or for applying for financial aid is completing the FAFSA. And so this is for students who are US citizens or eligible non-citizens. So that's usually permanent residents or green card holders. So the FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And it's an application that helps students qualify for specific financial aid. So it's not a scholarship application itself. You don't directly get money from the FAFSA, but it just gives the schools an idea of where the students' families are at financially so that they can see what kind of aid they're eligible for and allocate it accordingly. In order to do the FAFSA, students and parents must file taxes correctly. And starting this year, the FAFSA is just going to be drawing that information directly from the IRS. So it's especially important that the students and their families have their taxes done on time, or like, you know, by the time that we're doing their application, and then that they are done correctly. So for students who are not US citizens or permanent residents, are undocumented students, in Colorado, we have the CASFA, which is the Colorado Application for State Financial Aid. So yes, we are a state that does allow undocumented students to receive financial aid from state money. And so it can only be used in Colorado, though. That is the stipulation to that. So for our undocumented students, we are looking at a lot of in-state schools because they can more easily get that financial aid. And so the CASFA application itself is very similar to FAFSA. They kind of model it off of FAFSA, and it also uses tax information for both the students and their parents, if applicable. So when we look at the financial aid process from submitting your application or submitting the student's applications, it was kind of three main steps. So the first one is that the students are actually completing the FAFSA. So that involves other steps, including creating FSA IDs, which we'll get into in a second, using that financial information from taxes and assets, etc. So that's the completion of the application. And then it gets sent to the colleges where the students are applying. And oftentimes the colleges will have more questions or what's called verification. So in verification, the schools are wanting to verify that what the students put in the FAFSA is correct. And so they'll ask for things or specific documents and information to complete their files before they can allocate their financial aid. And so yes, that's step 3 is that colleges do evaluate the applications, the complete files. They can only review files once they're complete. So students do have to finish verification in order to get their financial aid applications considered. And then so once the colleges have all that information, they can look at it and give the student their financial aid award letter or package, which we'll get into in a minute as well. So the first step in completing the FAFSA is to create an FSA ID. So you might remember this from your own experience, but you need that login information in order to be able to complete the FAFSA. I still have mine on my phone somewhere, my ID written down, but that's kind of the beginning point for students and also parents now. So that's just their login information. It's connected to their social security number. New this year, parents who don't have social security numbers can now create FSA IDs. We're still waiting to hear from FSA on the process for that and what exactly that will look like. But it is important to note that every person who is going to be considered a contributor on the FAFSA, so their information has to be included, will need an FSA ID this year, regardless of whether the parents have social security numbers. And so, yes, the contributors include the students and whichever parent or parents gives the student more financial support. So if a student has parents who are together, then they will need both of their parents. If they have parents who are separated or divorced or just live with one parent, they'll just need to use the information of the parent who contributes more financial support to them, to the student. Also important this year is that the FSA IDs must be created at least 3 days before starting the FAFSA. So that's kind of important as we're working with students to remember that they need to already have their FSA ID for a couple days so that their identity can get verified before we begin the FAFSA. And this step is not included for those completing FAFSA because it does go through federal student aid, but they do have a login that they will have to create as well. So once you have your login information for the FAFSA or CASFA, it's a matter of actually completing the application, and that is largely what you all will be helping us with this year is getting the students to complete those applications. So examples of what they'll need are their 2022 IRS tax returns, and in their W-2s for the parents and students. So essentially we just need the tax information from the previous year, which this year will be 2022, in order to complete the FAFSA. And we do need that for parents and students. And then we'll also need other financial information such as non-taxable income, expenses such as child support paid or received, and then assets as well. So again, it does transfer from the IRS, like I was saying earlier, but it is really helpful to have those taxes with you if there are any hiccups. We can still input some of this information manually. Okay, so in terms of actually completing the FAFSA, again, you'll need an FSA ID for anybody who's going to be putting information on the FAFSA, but then the students will just go to the FAFSA website. So it opens in December. We don't know exactly what day it's opening yet with this whole FAFSA revamp. We have a lot of missing information at this moment, but we are hoping to see the FAFSA available in December so that students can get started on those financial aid applications. And we do encourage students to apply sooner rather than later because oftentimes the FAFSA money is first come, first serve, especially before the priority deadlines. And as of right now, many schools have not pushed back their priority deadlines despite the later rollout of the FAFSA. So it will definitely be a bit more challenging to get students to complete the financial aid applications before March 1st or whatever deadline the schools have, which is usually right around then. But it is important that we can help them get it done as soon as possible.
Emily, it looks like we have 3 questions in the chat that I think we should address now.
Great.
So let's see.
I can ask it.
Yeah, please do.
Ambria?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I had heard that FAFSA was moving to a direction of whoever claims students on their taxes is the parent that they would need to provide their tax information for. Is that true? Is there knowledge around that? Just specifically around, obviously, the 50-50 support. Okay, but who's the 51% support financially? Is the claiming of the taxes included in that 51% is my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is like previous years based on the like who's giving more support, so like the 51-49 or whatever, and not necessarily who's claiming them on their taxes. Natasha, correct me if I'm wrong, and feel free to jump in here too. But yeah, so it's not necessarily about who claims them on their taxes. The taxes are going to be important this year because instead of like household size, it's like families. I can't remember the exact term, but they're looking at like the household size essentially, and they're looking at the taxes for how many dependents were claimed for that. So that might come up in verification if a student wasn't claimed on that parent's taxes, just like looking at the household number. I don't know if that makes sense. Natasha, if you have anything to add to make that more clear.
Yeah, that was great, Emily. So there will be a way for families if the parent who provides more financial support didn't claim the student as a dependent, there will be a way to correct for that manually. So we'll dive into that a lot more in future sessions. But for now, just the main thing to take away is that it is whichever parent provides more financial support. And if they provide the same amount of financial support, then it should be the parent who has more income and assets. And we'll go over that several times in upcoming sessions, so everybody has a chance to really think through it, and we'll also try it out in scenarios.
Looks like the next one is about whether you need to create the parent FSA ID at least 3 days in advance. And yes, at least 3 days. It's actually saying 3 to 7 at this point. Just because it takes a minute for them to verify the identity with Social Security. And again, we don't know the process for parents who don't have socials creating FSA IDs, so it's likely that that could take even longer because they are going to find ways to verify the identity. Renee, I don't know for sure if those are, I think it is business days. It's a good question. And then Cynthia asked, how soon can parents and students create the FSA ID? That's a great question. So if students and parents have a Social Security number, they can do it now. It's just the parents who don't have Social Security numbers that we have to wait on until closer to when the FAFSA is actually rolled out. But if you can encourage any students and parents who are able to create their FSA IDs now, that would be preferable. We're hoping to get a lot of that done in the fall so that we can be ready to go when the FAFSA rolls out. Is if the parent is currently in school receiving aid, can they use that FSA ID? Yes, that is a great question as well. So like once you get your FSA ID, you have it for life. So a lot of parents who are in school will already have one, or if the student has an older sibling who's been to school, the parent will likely have an FSA ID. It's a lot of clicking reset password with some of those parents, but it is possible to recover those IDs.
And Emily, I'll chime in to share a little bit more context to our volunteers on the call. Our goal especially with our high school focused workshops will be that DSF College advisors have set the stage for successful FAFSA or CASPA application completion at the workshops. And so this front end work of having students and family members as much as possible creating their FSA IDs before the workshops will be kind of the task of our college advisors. And then during workshops, we'll be seeking to complete those applications with the support of volunteers and with DSF staff.
Thanks, Gabe. Okay, so feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. I'm going to keep going here, but we'll continue to answer those as they come up. So Yes, once the students have submitted the FAFSA, they will receive their student aid index. For those of you who have done FAFSA before, this is kind of the new EFC, or expected family contribution. So the student aid index is what colleges use to determine students' eligibility for financial aid. So it's kind of like the benchmark for where they're at financially, and so they can look at that and see what kind of aid they're eligible for. So again, this number is not the amount of money that the family will have to pay for college. That's one of the reasons they changed it from EFC, was it was kind of confusing, and that people were thinking that that would, like, the expected family contribution would be the exact amount that they would have to pay. But it's really just an index that colleges can use. And so again, with that, it's also not the amount of aid that the student will receive. So the SAIs range from negative 1,500 and all the way up. And if a student has an SAI of negative 1,500, between negative 1,500 and 0, that means that they are qualifying for the maximum Pell Grant, which this year is just over $7,000. 7,395. But so if this essentially means that they're a lower income family and that they will be eligible for that maximum amount of financial aid. And then the submission summary is a detailed report of what was submitted on the FAFSA. So the student and the colleges can go back in and look and see what was actually submitted. And for those of you who have done FAFSA in the past, that's the new student aid report, or SAR. So we now call that the submission summary. And then so after submitting the FAFSA or CASFA, what happens? So once colleges finish reviewing the SAI and the submission summary, they might be able to offer the student a financial aid award letter, or they might need some more files to be able to complete that. So that's kind of that is what I was talking about earlier with verification. So again, the colleges are verifying the information on the FAFSA or CASFA as well. The verification also occurs for CASFA students. So they'll be asking additional questions. So like we were talking about with Ambria's question, regarding household size. So they might be asking you like, hey, is this how many people are actually in your family? And you'll have to help the students will have to fill out a document with that. Other times in the past, it's been like tax transcripts and that kind of thing, which hopefully will be minimized this year because it's drawing from the IRS. But it is really important because of this verification process that the students log into their college portals. And that's the login information that they get from the colleges when they're accepted. And that allows them to go and see various things like, signing up for advising, looking at scholarships, looking at financial aid, but there will be an area in their portals for financial aid so that they have to go check that and see if they have any requirements that they have to fulfill. So yeah, again, examples of verification: family size verification, verification of income, and if the student isn't using parents on the FAFSA, that means they're an independent student, and they will certainly be verified if they completed the FAFSA without any parent information. And we'll get more into what the independent versus dependent student looks like in future trainings, but just know that most of the students that we are working with will be dependent. So after the financial aid file is complete, the colleges are able to review that and give the student back an award letter, or award package is another word for that. And so these are what we use with students to evaluate the total costs that they're required to pay per semester. So we have an example of kind of an old one here, but it looks at the estimated cost. So it kind of breaks it down for the students. So it's saying, okay, your tuition is going to be $6,266 a semester, housing, and then it breaks. So as Gabe was saying before, we have the direct and indirect costs, so it kind of breaks it down for the students in many schools' financial aid packages, but it kind of just helps us get an idea of how much they'll be paying or asked to pay at the end of the day. But then it also provides how much money they are awarded from the school. So it looks like this student got the federal Pell Grant. They also got this U Promise and other grants. So when we're talking to students about this, we say, okay, you got about $8,000 in free money per semester, or just over $16,000 total. So this is the money, again, that they don't have to pay back, and it's just chipping away at that cost of attendance, which was calculated for them here. And then it will also offer them loans. So the maximum amount of loans that students can be offered as a freshman is $5,500. And so it breaks it down into this unsubsidized and subsidized, which Gabe kind of went over before. But if you have questions about that, again, feel free to put them in the chat. And then it adds work study as well. So this is the amount that students could potentially earn with their on-campus job, is what they're saying. And so when we add that all together, we can kind of see how much total financial aid they're awarded, and then subtract that from the cost of attendance to see what the student would have to pay out of pocket. So that is kind of how we look at it with students, and we have, worksheets that we can use with them to go over the cost of attendance versus how much money they're given, to see at the end of the day what they're going to owe to that college, and to see with their families if that's a possibility for them. So for this student, they're still going to have to pay about 15 grand out of pocket to attend CU Boulder, unless they get some outside scholarships like the DSF. So yes, just to kind of bring it back out to the big picture and why we're doing all of this. So when we're advising students, we're looking at helping them find the best fit, which takes into consideration academic, social, and financial fit. So we want to make sure that they're going to a school that has the programs that they're interested in and is an appropriate amount of challenging for them, where they feel they have a good social fit, like they can do the clubs that they want to, or maybe play the sports, or find people who look like them, all of that kind of thing. And then the financial fit. So making sure that along with the academic and social fit, that they can pay for it realistically. So this is the model that we use when we're advising students. And so the financial aid is a really big piece of that, because in order to go to college, the students have to be able to realistically pay for it, and we're hoping to get them through with as much financial aid as possible. So that is kind of what we have for you this morning. We have a lot of time for questions, so if you all have them, definitely send them our way. We can take some time to answer them. But thank you all for being here. We will definitely have more trainings that go into further detail about all of this, but hopefully this was able to give you kind of a broad overview of what the financial aid process looks like and how we're going to help students through that.
Thank you, Emily. And once again, if anyone has questions, feel free to stay on. And if not, everyone have a wonderful day.
Spell, yeah, we can, it's in Teams, but for those of you who don't have it, we can also, I assume Sarah and Natasha, we can make that available for people as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Emily. And if you joined us today because someone forwarded the link to you, we won't be able to send you the slides unless you send us your email. So if you prefer not to receive future opportunities from us, you can absolutely say you just want the materials from today, but we will send it out to everybody who sends us their email or is a DSF staff member or volunteer. Thanks so much. I'm here for all the waves. I assume some of the folks were probably DPS related and are not on our current non-future center email list. So we'll see if more of them send their emails.
I just want to say hi to Gabe. I don't know if you remember me. We used to work at Lincoln together. It's nice seeing you.
Good to see you too. How are you?
Good. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye. Thanks for joining. So I'm guessing no further questions, Natasha, huh?
I think that's probably safe to say at this point.
All right.
You all did an awesome job. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Mhm.
Bye.